Hi there. It's great to be in Madrid with you, and I am going to take you to a different place, however. I'm going to take you to Entrepreneur Country from Madrid today. And as those of you who are entrepreneurs in the audience will know, Entrepreneur Country is that place that you go to every day, where you share with other entrepreneurs what it means to deal with all of the near-death experiences, but the breakthrough moments of being an entrepreneur. And as we were going through the financial downturn, I remember thinking to myself frequently, I wish more people would go to Entrepreneur Country. I wish they could understand what it took to build a business. And as we went through the crisis even further, I came to the conclusion that it's not just that I wish everybody would go to Entrepreneur Country, but that everybody is going to Entrepreneur Country, that the world is fundamentally changing, that the social contract has been completely shattered, and that technology is a layer which is transforming society. It is that great quote from Wayne Gretzky, the Canadian hockey player. He said, good players play to where the hockey puck is, but great players play to where the hockey puck is going. And I think that we at Ariadne Capital, and perhaps all of us in the room here, have a sense of where the world is going by virtue of working in the startup world. And so that future vision, I've kind of rolled back into the present tense, and I've written about it in my book, Welcome to Entrepreneur Country. And we're working on getting a Spanish version of that soon. I'm working with people tomorrow, actually, that want to publish a book in Spanish. So we are really issuing a global invitation to go to Entrepreneur Country. If you go to entrepreneurcountry.com, you'll see that site. And Entrepreneur Country is going global. On the 30th of September, we announced it in 15 regions around the world. People can go to the site. And basically what we're doing is enabling startups, wherever they're based, to become discoverable by corporates wherever they're based, reducing the cost of discovery, but reducing the cost of disruption as well. We're enabling basically a global discovery between corporates and startups. Now, why does that matter? Why should you care? Well, as Paris mentioned, I grew up near Palo Alto, and my family still lives there. And if I should have a bias, I suppose it should be Palo Alto. And what Palo Alto does consistently and exceptionally well is to systematically, consistently build global leading firms based in Palo Alto. And it says, basically, if you're a Delaware corporation, if your financial accounts are done in US GAAP, if your angel investors went to Stanford, if you know where the University Avenue Cafe is, then we know how to deal with you. But God forbid you're based in Odessa or Namibia or Cairo, because then you are essentially unstructured data. And the most you can hope for is to kind of get yourself out to Palo Alto. But that doesn't map to my reality. We started working with an obscure Swedish entrepreneur about 10 years ago who had a base in Estonia, and I bet they didn't know where that was in Palo Alto. And he went on to transform the telecoms world with Skype. Or my shareholder, Roman Stanek, who's on his third successful business based out in California, but one of the Czech Republic's most important entrepreneurs, has sold 2 companies and is baking away the third one, Good Data, backed by Andreessen Horowitz. So my own reality doesn't tell me that great entrepreneurs need to go to Palo Alto. Indeed, it tells me that they can be born anywhere and that they can create great companies. And yet, what we aren't doing is creating systematically and consistently great companies from anywhere on earth. The entrepreneurs can be born anywhere, and it's true that we have exceptional entrepreneurs, and we've backed 7 explosive growth companies with Ariadne Capital over the past 12 years. But what's needed is essentially an open-sourced, a federated global platform that takes Palo Alto to the world, that provides a positive architecture, that looks at the successful business models and gives a toolkit and information and enables startups to be discovered, to be structured in a way whereby they can be understood and interchanged with other companies and corporates, partners who can help them. And that is the purpose and the mission and the proposition that Entrepreneur Country has accepted. Will reduce that cost of startup discovery, but also reduce the cost of corporate disruption, exploding the market and democratizing access. Because startups basically have a choice, don't they? They can disrupt or they can engage. But ultimately, the cartographers win. The people who structure their industries win big. And Palo Alto doesn't just structure the startups by investing in them. They structure their industry, continuing to reinforce their role in the industry as the epicenter. But I'm really going to talk to you about this little guy today, and I have to admit that that face is probably my face too. And I never forget that Ariadne Capital, with the 100 business plans that get sent to us every single month, and we sit down with about 30 to 40 of those entrepreneurs, that basically the more you tell those entrepreneurs that they can't do something, the more they're saying in their own mind, you just wait, I'm going to show you that I can do that. And I'm going to give you 2 good reasons why you should care about the face of that little guy. By virtue of his upbringing, his expertise, or maybe just that big chip on his shoulder, this little guy basically sees things. He sees the future, that future vision of where the world's going, that future vision of where the puck is going. The second reason, though, is more important. A lot of people actually have a future vision. A lot of people have an insight into consumer behavior or where the world is going and do nothing. Entrepreneurs are people who are willing to live abnormal lives to bring that future vision to reality, who work tirelessly, who are obsessed with bringing that what they believe is inevitable to the present from the future. And crucially, all of society benefits by their living those abnormal lives. So there's a lot of people out there who believe that money is the most important tool in the toolkit of the entrepreneur. A lot of people in Palo Alto believe that money is the most important tool. A lot of people around the world, and perhaps here even in Madrid. But I'm here to tell you that it's not the case. The job of the money is actually to find the entrepreneurs. And if we look throughout history, if we step back in time to Christopher Columbus, who discovered the New World, he's the guy that we remember for discovering that new world. Queen Isabella had an upside in the outcome. The Michelangelos and Leonardo da Vinci's who painted the Sistine Chapel and did other wonderful things, those are the people that we remember, the people who created the future, who brought that future to the present. They weren't always called entrepreneurs throughout history, but the people who back them, while important, they had an upside in the outcome, but it's the job of the capital provider to find the men and the women with the ideas who are executing those ideas and pulling the future into the present. So let's continue with this historical perspective. Carlota Perez, who is a Venezuelan economist, very helpfully looked over the past 300 years when she went out to Silicon Valley in 1971. And she found that basically the same thing happens every 60 to 70 years. She found that there's a moment of disruptive technology, a big bang. In 1971, we had the Intel microprocessor, which exploded into the industrial landscape. And then you basically have 60 or 70 years through 4 distinct processes, where through that arc of transformation in society, not just business, a whole new order of things emerges. And here we have a whole series of companies that are derivative from that original disruptive technology. And what's important is that the same thing happens again and again. We can go back to the printing press hundreds of years ago, but it's always the same thing. A moment of disruptive technology, a series of derivative technologies, and then we get to a turning point, a financial crisis. Remember that financial crisis? But importantly, the reason why we get pulled out of that financial crisis is that what started as a small fact becomes an unstoppable movement in the market because the corporates, the establishment embraces that change and engages with it. So in Julie speak, what I would say is that David, those internet entrepreneurs from about 15 years ago, when they emerged in the mid-90s and the late 90s, they wanted to kill the Goliaths. They wanted to take over the world. They wanted to establish themselves as the big boys. And that didn't really happen, to be honest. Some of them did, but not all of them did by any means. It was a small percentage. What has happened, though, over the past 15 years is that regardless of what was happening in the financial markets, broadband and mobile penetration just continued to penetrate our lives, bringing a new common sense into the world. And we're in that second half of the Carlota Perez cycle, where the corporates, large institutions are embracing the change, and basically a new common sense is emerging. And so that's why pretty much everything in my world, and I would argue yours too, can get plotted on this grid. David the entrepreneur starts in the lower left-hand corner, in a pit of vulnerability, because you always start in a pit of vulnerability as an entrepreneur. It's difficult to start a business. In fact, sometimes and many times, it's absolutely terrifying to start a business. But David the entrepreneur knows things. He understands that consumer data is driving the new services, that it's the fuel that's driving the whole economy today. He understands this network orientation. The world has gone network, and that doesn't mean just that Facebook's a phenomenon, that everything, our lives have fundamentally changed from a linear or hierarchical orientation to a network orientation. And he understands perhaps innately, intuitively, even if he wouldn't describe it this way, as what I refer to as ecosystem economics. And his journey is across the grid, from the lower left-hand corner to the upper right-hand corner. Goliath could be a newspaper group, a radio station, a healthcare firm, an insurance firm, a retailer, a bank, anyone with customers. But Goliath's role, the large established companies, industrial groups, the family businesses, the companies which we just take for granted, we don't think of them as innovators, we don't think of them as digital animals. Those corporates are super important in what's going on today because they are the highway. We've got David, who's the digital car. And basically, David, he's got a problem. He's got a customer acquisition problem. He's got to acquire customers. He needs distribution. He needs to scale. He needs reach. How does he find his audience? Who does he sell to? Well, he's got a couple of choices. He can either do a deal with one of the app marketplaces, the iOS, Android, etc., a lot of companies based in Palo Alto, or he could work with the homegrown companies that are probably right in his backyard, in his own geography, but they might not appear to him to be open for business. And the reason why sometimes David gets across that grid and he gets to the upper right-hand side and he gets locked in to these new industries and he becomes the new Goliath, even if he wants to continue to be called David, is because Goliath consistently underestimates David. And I'll never forget when we first started working with Skype more than 10 years ago, before Skype was a big deal, before it received any of its big funding that made it scale so tremendously. I found myself on Radio 4 in London, sitting across from the CEO of the incumbent telco. And I was starting to talk about what Skype was doing in the market, and I remember he cut me off and he said, that's not going to work. You're going to lose your shirt. He's going to go bust. Let me tell you, it's not going to work. And I just remember thinking for just a moment, this is fascinating. Here he is underestimating the entrepreneur who completely disrupted the music industry with Kazaa. And I said, let me tell you, he is so happy that you've underestimated him. You've given him time to get across the grid. So it's really a question of who wins. If Goliath embraces David, the digital entrepreneur, he forces David to articulate the strategic value that he brings to the bank, to the telco, to the retail shop. If David underestimates David and condescends to him and doesn't feel that he has to be in a dialogue with him, then David is able to get across the grid. Now, let me tell you an example of a company who's done just that. Monetize is the third fastest growing company in the United Kingdom. They've become the global leader in mobile banking, headquartered in London, and they basically provide a service to 1,000 financial institutions. They have a market capitalization of more than 900 million sterling. And Alistair Lukes, the founder and CEO, said a very basic thing at the beginning. He said, if this mobile banking is going to work, it has to work for everyone. If this is going to work, it has to work for everyone. The mobile telecoms operator and the banks will have to each get a cut of the digital revenue. The individual will want a lower cost of capital compared to, say, what they get from Western Union, who will charge them 22% if you're poor. And he spent the first 5 years of the 10-year journey that he's been on, not just building his company, but building the ecosystem of mobile banking. He was worried not just about the profitability of Monetize, but worried about the profitability of the industry. And as a result, he's gotten pulled into the center of that industry because it is an ecosystem, because he basically has organized the economics for that. It's become the third fastest growing firm in the UK, and he's buying his competitors and servicing 1,000 financial institutions. In that decision between enabling or disrupting, he was able to embrace the banks, and the banks embraced him. He's now enabling them rather than disrupting them. David and Goliath are dancing. So we see these David and Goliath deals all over the industry. And frankly, the next 10 years are going to be more and more examples of David and Goliath dancing and that new common sense emerging in the industry and in our lives. This is the second half of the Carlota Perez cycle. And there's one vision of the future whereby technology firms just continue to take over every industry, as Amazon has to books, and Apple has to music, and Google has to advertising, and you can see where this is going. But there's another future to write, a fight-back strategy, if you will, a kind of insurgency, where Goliath responds to the invitation to go to entrepreneur country. And he goes with humility and a lot of respect. And he says, I may be the largest player in my industry in my country, but I don't really understand digital, and my people don't really have the right clock speed. We're not good at innovating, and I think I need to have a conversation with David, because I respect how hard he works, and he seems to know things that we don't understand. David and Goliath must dance. Now, this is a P&L game. This is not about giving more work to the investment bankers to buy companies or to put hundreds of millions of pounds aside into pots of cash to go invest in companies. This is really the hard work of building business, of building new digital revenues, in the same way that Monetize re-intermediated the banks into their industry, giving them digital revenues that would have otherwise gone to PayPal or Western Union. This is the hard work of building P&L, not balance sheet, inside of retail firms, banks, telcos, healthcare companies, not even technology businesses, normal businesses that need to get to the other side, which need to go to entrepreneur country. And what does it matter? Why should you care? Well, from Helsinki to Dublin and Madrid to Istanbul, the best and the brightest of Europe's 550 million people, the entrepreneurs of Europe, basically get backed by venture capitalists to build digital cars, to build great companies. And those venture capitalists have structured their industry too, and they're playing a game. They're going to back the best and the brightest European entrepreneurs, and they're basically going to sell them to a US technology firm, probably based in Palo Alto or close by. See, if you didn't go to Palo Alto at the beginning, you'll go to Palo Alto at the end. So at Ariadne Capital, I never forget that innovation is really about disruptive economics, not disruptive technology. Otherwise, we'd all be flying the Concorde. We're not. We're stuffed into jumbo jets. And I never forget the world has gone network. Winning is no longer a function of how smart you are, how hard you work, or who you know. It's a question of how you understand your role in the industry, how you engage your network, if you have identified your natural allies, and if you've created a set of economics to make it in their interest for you to be successful. All industries are being transformed by digital business models today. In 2013, the network benefits accrue to the people who understand their role in the industry and build the economics for that ecosystem. And that, in turn, leads to exceptional returns for their shareholders. Don't go to Palo Alto. Go to Entrepreneur Country. Thank you very much.